Welcome to the Mojo for Musicians podcast from Manny Cabo Media, where we dig deep into today's top strategies to help you take your music career to the next level with real, raw, and uplifting conversations with industry professionals that are making moves, making a difference, and making the best versions of themselves to inspire you to do the same. What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, Manny Cabo, and welcome to another episode of Mojo for Musicians.
Yeah, Mojo Maniacs!
That's my James Hetfield impression for the day. Welcome back to another screaming episode of Mojo for Musicians. And this one's certainly going to be fun-filled, especially for my fellow singers in the house looking to bring out the inner screamer in you. Because my guest has made a career in building careers of tons of incredible lead singers out on the rock circuit. And I'm so fired up to bring her on. But first, I've got a great episode that's extremely informative, especially for my fellow vocalists out there. Because as a singer myself, I've come across many strategic elements in recording the best possible vocals. And I can tell you, I've had my share of trial and error. But once you nail down the specifics and your preferred methods, then you're on your way to a consistent realm of performances. And essentially, that's what you want to strive for at the end of the day. The one thing that resonates throughout all of my performances, and one that I certainly uphold, is that a singer has to do the due diligence, which means learn the lyrics and the understanding of the message of the song so you could then perform that message so that your listeners can feel it and, above all, believe it and ride that roller coaster of melodies with you. Now, there certainly isn't a right or wrong way of recording vocals, just the perfect way for you as the artist. Some singers like to be bold and take the whole verse from beginning to end, while others insist upon phrasing one section at a time and punching in when need be. And although in a perfect world, a full run-through would be ideal, that's usually not the case. And again, I stress there's nothing wrong with that because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you record the perfect take because once it's uploaded, it's forever. And I don't care how you get there as long as you nailed it in the end. Now, in my experiences, I've sometimes received a song that's completely new and it would be impossible for me to deliver the perfect performance because it required some emotional understanding and attachment, not only to the lyrics, but to certain nuances of the song. And let's be realistic. When time is money, efficiency is key. And for these circumstances, a more modular approach may be needed. So what the hell does that mean? Well, I would sometimes have to have a certain part of the song looped over and over so I could at least feel the vibe of the song and start with that. And many times the engineer would just hit record and let me loose to see what I feel. And believe it or not, those are some of the most organic takes that were also the best takes that were printed in the final comp. And it happens all the time, so it's something that I encourage when time and money permit, of course. For me personally, sometimes it helped to consistently repeat the lines over and over until it felt real. And again, this is something that I fully endorse because when you're a hired gun to sing a demo and you don't have the time to rehearse the song, every little tactic to deliver the song in a believable manner is something that I always welcomed. So repetition has always been a popular favorite of mine. And again, I want to stress that if everyone's on board to getting the best take, as I alluded to before, then no one really cares what it takes to get it, just as long as you get it. And I'm certainly all for going for the more modular approach. The cool thing that happens in most cases, for me anyway, that after so many takes, my initial phrasing changes and transitions into that more believable realm that you want to arrive at. That's the one thing to take into account because once you understand the song, the tendency to deliver it differently is completely normal. And sometimes you just have to go with it. And I, for one, have always been one to go with my gut. My advice is don't be so damn hard on yourself at first and give yourself a chance to absorb the lyrical content and let it marinate. And if you're patient with yourself, only good things will happen. I promise. Now, of course, there's multiple schools of thought with both approaches. Some feel that when you're recording a performance from beginning to end, you might lose a lot of the dynamics of the performance, while others might feel that breaking up the phrasing might be tiresome to the vocalist. So, my advice to you is simply this. If you have the opportunity to get the lyrics before the recording date, then make sure you memorize the crap out of them. However, if you don't have that luxury, then be honest with yourself and have an open line of communication with your engineer with respect to taking it phrase by phrase, and try not to push yourself at first, so you have enough strength and momentum to carry yourself through the rest of the recording. Now, my personal preference, and I'm sure tons of singers out there would agree, is to always tackle the less vocal demanding parts of the song first, which are usually the verses. And the main reason for that is so I could preserve my voice for the more powerful and dominating parts of the song, which are usually the bridge and the chorus, leaving the more aggressive and bold parts of the song toward the latter half of the session, where my voice by this time is comfortably warm and loose. And conversely, if after analyzing the song, I feel that the chorus can be tackled first, then I'll just get that out of the way without rushing, of course, and try to get the most believable and cohesive performance. Again, guys, there's no right or wrong way, just as long as you're able to nail the full dynamic range of the vocals. You have to remember, in order for the song to be effective, you have to take the listener on a roller coaster, because otherwise the song becomes flat and stale. And when you can't engage the listener vocally, then you take away the power of the song, and now you just wasted everybody's time on the track. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but I have to stress once again that it's so important to open the lines of communications with your engineer. If you don't like the take, make sure that you address that, because an engineer won't know if you're tired, or if you're in a happy or sad place, or if you're doubtful, unless you let them know. And let's face it, both your names are going on the track. Because when all is said and done, you both want to make sure that you're fully content and unhesitant about endorsing the product. Because there's nothing worse than having to rummage through an extended amount of unwanted takes. For me personally, I know if the take didn't feel right, I'll just tell the engineer, listen, scratch that, I'll do it again. Because it certainly does save time. And you don't want to run the risk of overextending a budget needlessly. But seriously, guys, if you have the luxury of time prior to the recording, then please, seriously, please use that time. Better prepare yourself and embrace those lyrics, because it will always, I repeat, always yield a positive result. All right. And when we come back, we're going to be talking to someone who certainly knows her way around the recording booth and how to get those screamingly raw and powerful vocals into the airwaves and into the hearts of the fans that love them. So don't go anywhere, because we'll be right back with the Scream Queen herself when we return.
You're listening to the Mojo for Musicians podcast. To learn more about becoming a guest on the show to share your mojo with us, visit mannycabo.com and send us an email in the contact section. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you like what you hear, be sure to give us a positive review on your favorite listening platform. And now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back, my Mojo Maniacs family. And man, do I have, and dare I say, screamingly fun episode for you guys today. And I want to send out a big shout out to my boy and fellow podcaster, Travis at Poddex, for the introduction. You are the man. Thank you so much. So I can honestly say, as a rock singer, I'm beyond fascinated by the insightful techniques that this woman has crafted and adding such power and conviction to the world of vocals. And certainly a bullet that I want to add to my belt of techniques. And she's established herself as the screaming lady, no surprise there. I wonder why. Who's worked with the likes of Kill Switch Engaged, Slipknot, Suicide Silence, and female powerhouses like Alyssa White-Gluz of Arch Enemy, and the list goes on. And guys, if you haven't heard these people, then seriously, take a listen and you'll understand the value of what Melissa does. Here's a little glimpse. Yeah, exactly. So now you understand where I'm coming from. And she's been molding rock stars since 1990, and her skills have taken her pupils to the top of the charts, raking up a plethora of awards. So, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome to the show the one and only Zen of screaming, Melissa Cross. Hey, Melissa, welcome to the show.
No pressure, Manny. Like,
Pressure, what are you talking about?
I'm
You've
just
created
a,
monsters.
I'm just a, I'm a little old lady. I just am actually a little old lady rock chick from all the way back in the '60s. Total, diehard rocker, former singer myself, and all in aid of furthering this wonderful, real movement of sincere rock and rollers. It was just the evolving of the genre, and I just was had a front row seat.
Oh
So
man,
I'm super
you're just
blessed.
way too humbling, way too humbling. Listen, listen. I'm gonna call BS on that because what you have accomplished in this world is just like awe inspiring. Just the fact alone that you've converted so many people, created your own style of singing, and I'm going to get into that later because your story is actually very fascinating to me, and I've related to you in many many ways. And seriously, it's truly an honor to have you on here. Just it's I don't know I don't know where to start. You've dealt with so many iconic singers that I've relished over the years, and I feel like they're filtering through this phone call right now. So thank you for gracing us with your voice and presence. So I have to ask you, are you responsible for the ever so popular? That's one of my favorite samples.
Oh, I no no no. That was I have a really funny story about that. Um, so that David Draymond is an extraordinary vocalist and has been. The story is that David came to me with a kind of beat up throat, and I was attempting to teach him a certain phonation that I call fry screaming. And it was taking him quite a long time to get it. And I realized, you know what, David? You know that thing you do in Down with the Sickness where you go, "Wah!" You do that? Well, that's it. He goes, oh, that? So
That's something I would
he
say.
was already doing what I was trying to teach him. So it was an interesting thing. We went, days of like trying to figure something out when it was something that he'd been doing all along. So he just didn't understand how it could be in context of, better screaming and
Yeah.
more. Fry screaming is really the thing that I have championed as the best bang for the buck for the least amount of effort, because it's actually the whole turnaround on this is that screaming is supposed to be quote loud end quote, right? But loud is a perception. Loud is not an action. Loud is a perception. So the perception of volume involves a frequency, not a decibel level. So the higher frequencies are louder to the human ear. To make these higher frequencies, you cannot cough up your lunch. You cannot do road rage because those higher frequencies are not available in the tissues that go like
Right,
that.
right,
Can't
right.
get them. They're too low.
Yeah, I've learned
But
that the hard way. I'm sure many
that's
singers have done
different, you know?
it. Yeah.
Like that sort of bird call, like, yes, that has higher frequencies, and it takes a certain technique to isolate it, and but it doesn't feel like road rage. It doesn't feel like the music is supposed to sound. That's the hard part.
Wow, that's interesting. Like that in itself, it's like it's mind-boggling. And I've learned that over the years with so many incredible vocalists and educators that have taught me about frequencies and how to not damage your voice. That's why I'm a little biased with this episode because it's just fascinating, the whole thing. And man, as I said before, I have so many questions, but I promise I will keep them to a minimum. But
Okay.
I have to tell you, I was fascinated by the whole concept that you originally embarked on, which, as I alluded to before, I connected to immediately, and that was embracing emotion and letting things happen naturally, and avoiding a word that I love that you use, avoiding contrivance. But what's
Mm.
interesting is that you are actually teaching a skill, which kind of goes against that principle. And I'm curious as to how you balance the two philosophies in such a fluid way. And the cool thing is, you're a classically trained vocalist,
Yes.
whose decision to become a teacher wasn't even a conscious decision, and yet you found that missing link between rock and classical music, and thank God you did. So please elaborate on that.
Well, I got injured. Did a show at CBGB's and I let out a scream that, was, I thought, see, all of my classical training, I was still studying classically when I was
Mm.
playing at CBGB's in 1985. And I went on stage and did this one scream and I couldn't speak anymore.
Right,
So
right. Makes
what I
sense.
had was a polyp. And in order to heal from that polyp, because I threw all my technique out the window, because the technique that I was learning
Ah,
did not sound like the way I wanted to sound. So I equated technique with the output of a certain kind of sound or genre. And that's the mistake, because a voice is a functional piece of machinery that doesn't care what genre it's doing. So the genre thing was kind of
mm,
bleeding into everything else. And I threw all my technique out the window so I could get a Janice sound. Janice was my hero, right? So it didn't, my
wow.
teachers weren't teaching me that. So when I recovered from the polyp in speech therapy, I found a
Total.
sensation, a physical sensation that felt like classical music, but it was in my speaking voice. And I thought, "Oh, so to get this
So that was your
head
epiphany
buzz
because
thing,
I
I
read
don't
about it and you
have
were
to sing
really, really
opera. I
frustrated
can
because you're
just
like, none
talk
of
with
this
it."
is
And
making
that was the
sense to
key.
me. And I
That
can
was how
imagine the
I
frustration. But you know what?
blended
I realize
speech
in my
level
life that from
sounds with,
failures and
speech
frustrations come
it's called
those
modal
epiphany
register,
moments,
modal
So
sounds
I completely
with
relate to that. Wow. And you
screaming.
know what?
And,
You damaged your
the whole
throat.
thing is
And
very
had that not
complex. I've
happened,
been
who
studying voice
knows if
science
I'd be,
since
sitting here talking to
1985
you
and
about
even
screaming.
more
Right.
intensively in the last
Wow.
couple of
That's
years.
fascinating.
And
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's part of the process. You have to accept those. I don't believe
exactly.
in failures at
Exactly.
all. I
And
mean,
the
try
Zen of
telling,
Screaming
Thomas
never,
Edison that,
that
you
video
failed a
never
thousand
would have come
times.
out had I not
I'm like,
gotten
no, I
injured. It would
didn't.
have
I
come
just came
out
up with
if I had
a
gotten
thousand ways on how to
the
not,
record deal that I
create a
was
light
supposed
bulb.
to get,
But
that I, fucked
that's
up because of
amazing. So
drugs and
I
alcohol.
want to delve into
Like it
question
was
number
like
one
all
because
these
with every
regrets that I
episode,
had were,
I
they
preface the
don't need to
show
be
with a
regrets
specific
because they were
topic.
all,
And today's topic is all
another
about tracking
event in
vocals,
the
one
story.
phrase at a time. And sure, listen, there's many schools of thought this style. Some support the whole, Manny, take it one take. That
Exactly.
cohesiveness is important, but others feel you may need a more modular strategy. And the reason why I ask you this is because screaming also requires that resonance, power, and of course, accuracy. And I just want to know how difficult it truly is to execute a whole line with this style of singing, and how successful is it?
Well, actually, the fry screaming is very much like singing. There's different kinds of screaming. There's different ways to get what's called in vocal science noise.
Mm,
Like there's pitch, which is a repetitive cycle per second. Like the note A on
okay.
the piano is 440 sound waves per second, or hertz, right?
Okay. Right.
So that's what pitch is. Noise is not a repeating cycle per second. It is the sound of you know, that's called noise,
Right.
because there's no repetitive frequency that creates a musical pitch,
Okay. Okay.
right? But even speaking, that's a pitch right there. Even speaking, the voice always has some kind of pitch. Maybe you don't recognize it, but noise just has no pitch at all.
Mm,
So those noises can be made in a flowing way, meaning flow phonation. For instance, like when you sing or when you chant, when you go, I am a robot, I am a robot, there is a flow phonation where the vocal folds stay together and
hmm.
create a continuum.
Right. Right.
That's called flow. And then there's the other way of screaming, which is called blow. Okay. So when you do the blow kind of screaming, it involves a constriction of the throat,
Okay.
right? Like kind of like a gag reflex.
Right. Right.
And when you constrict that part of the throat. It has nothing to do with the noise is not coming from your real vocal folds. It's coming from the tissue that's up higher up, and it's this that sound of going. That is the sound of those tissues knocking against the epiglottis, which is that little flap that goes
Mm.
over
Right, right,
your
right.
windpipe if you swallow.
Yes.
One of the so that blowaway is not wrong, but it's far more um, active. It's far more athletic.
Mm.
It's also more dangerous for lighter voices, and you get no overtone.
Mm.
That's the problem with that scream. Is that with the competing um, uh, bass kick, double kick, all that mid and low stuff buries that sound. So it's
Right.
very difficult to get it to separate because it just saturates.
Yeah.
It just gets canceled.
Yeah, that makes
But if you
sense.
have the flow way, the flow way is just like chanting. That's my true
That's
folds doing that,
incredible.
right? But if I were to try to do that like higher up, then I can't sustain it
Right.
because it takes air turbulence, the
Mm.
blowing of whoa, like that blowing of air straight through the lungs that wiggles all those tissues, that knocks against the epiglottis. That's called the blowaway.
It's so funny. I
And you
could
can't
visualize
sustain
you
that.
doing that, and it makes perfect sense. I close my eyes and visualize what you're doing. It makes perfect
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah. You can't sustain
Mm.
because you're using the air to make
Right,
the
right,
sound.
right,
But
right.
there's no escaping air in that. It can
Wow.
go on forever.
You know, it's funny. I always
Almost
I
forever.
always kid around with the term. Thank God for smart people. Because I could not think around and be like, what is going on with my voice? Maybe I should just use my epiglottis. Maybe that's what I need to do. So thanks to people like you out there that analyze and are really analytical. You came up with an amazing solution. And my God, evidenced by the iconic songs and screams. Because who hasn't heard Slipknot and who hasn't heard no Disturbed. So I get it, and it's indispensable because you're not damaging your voice essentially, but the audible side of it sounds like you're destroying it. It sounds like razor
Yes.
blades.
Yes, it does. It sounds like you're really like killing yourself. Sounds like
Right.
somebody's dying. Like that.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is like really, and that is very soft. It sounded loud to you because you heard it through a microphone.
Yeah.
So the microphone actually takes all of those frequencies and makes a big picture. It's not, it doesn't have those frequencies don't trail off. So
Mm.
it's just like a wall of that sound.
Wow.
And because it has that 5 to 8K frequency in it, it seems to be super loud.
Yeah, it's like an
But
illusion. It's incredible.
it's total illusion because when I demonstrate that at a super quiet volume in a restaurant, the people in the front lobby are turning around going, what's going on in there?
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah.
It travels very quickly,
I
that
can
sound.
see it. It does. Because right now, even when you're doing that, it sounds like, whoa.
Whoa, yes.
Right.
It because it gets there faster. It vibrates faster. It's a
Right.
speed of it's a higher speed.
I
But
get it.
if I do this, it sounds like a low thing because it's slow.
Right.
There's no pitch there when I go, but that's not a note,
Mhm.
but it sounds low because it's slow. But if I go, that sounds high because it's going faster.
Wow. Yeah, it makes
So there's
perfect
like
sense.
resonance. It's grabbing resonances in the vocal tract.
It does.
Like that's what happens with phonation. Like your vocal folds create a source energy, but the actual sound of it comes from the resonating space in the vocal tract.
Well, what's
And
amazing about it, it's not thin. It actually fills up the space. You like the entire realm, the low, mids, and highs. It's awesome.
well, yeah, because you can actually control it by the shape of the vocal tract.
Yeah.
In other words, the vowel E for eat, right?
Right.
I can go E or I can go E, same note, same vowel, but they
Mm.
sound completely different.
Right.
That's because the shape of my vocal tract was different.
That's
So that's
insane.
the same way you like control like high screams, low screams, mid screams. It's not about like it up there, down there. It's about the shape of the vowel
Mm.
that changes to high to low,
I
to
get it.
what's high.
I get it.
So anyway, and also the vibration of the vocal. It's really complicated. I'm sorry, I'm such a geek.
No, no, no. This is the stuff that helps me understand because I'm a firm believer, and I interviewed Richard Fink, who's the CEO of Throga, in his 7 dimensions of singing, and he says the same thing. We geeks, just like you break down equipment, you have to break down and understand the voice because if you understand what you're doing wrong, it's a lot easier to correct the issue. It makes perfect sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
Wow.
And a lot of there's a lot more research in speech science
Hmm.
than singing science because
Mm.
singing has a lot of artistry in it and like a lot of voodoo snake oil kind of stuff going on, but there's nothing glamorous about the spoken word.
Yeah.
And so there's a ton of research that can be gotten from the speech voice because
Got it.
it's a voice is a voice.
Yeah, of course.
So,
Wow.
anyway, it's uh, this Throga thing sounds pretty interesting.
Oh yeah, I gotta connect you guys because I mean I'm
Yes.
sure you guys could geek out all day long.
Yeah,
He's
beam me up,
I
man.
I definitely will. So with that being said, like what are some of the biggest challenges that you encounter with singers early on in their career, like with respect to technique, especially in what you teach? And the reason why I ask this question, it's so important because I'm catering to the right way of doing things, which you obviously teach. And early on in your career, you want to build those good habits, especially toward our future rock stars listening out there, because I'm big on teaching our youth. And let's face it, these are the ones that are going to continue our rock legacies. So,
That's right.
what type of challenges do you find in the younger artist? It doesn't have to be young, even someone mid in their careers, but mistakes that are made that you have corrected that can help my listeners understand what they need to do if they're doing the same thing.
Well, I think the hardest thing is the disassociation between the emotion and the sound.
Mm,
In other words, it people learn this when they're very young, and like 16. We got a show, Battle of the Bands, one weekend. We can blow out our voices and then recover during the week and then do it again in the weekends.
right.
It's not that the industry changed and had a greater demand, but the thing is that the hardest thing for high profile artists that are already successful,
Right.
the hardest sell is that this small movement is enough
Hmm.
because their career has been, predicated on the basis of their understanding that more aggression and more effort equals quality.
Hmm.
And more effort is not extra quality. So to re-educate what is the criteria for a great scream not being effort and not being an emotional loss of control,
Right.
that is not sustainable.
Hmm.
That emotional loss of control with the screaming that you do as a young metal kid is not sustainable for a tour
No.
because 25 shows a month of that, you won't even last 2
Well, I've seen
shows.
Nickelback. I mean, Chad, I love their music. The productions are insane, but he's canceled so many shows, and it's unfortunate because the fans are the ones that suffer. His voice is shot, and so many singers out there that I've seen that you expect them to uphold the performance of an album, and I like to pride myself on that. What you hear on my records, you hear live, and singing that style of music. If you're not singing correctly, A, you'll destroy your voice, and B, lose a lot of fans.
Well, yeah, I mean, but these metal fans are, it's all about like sustainability.
Mm.
It's not there's no such thing as incorrect
Hmm.
because this is not opera,
Right.
and this is more of a theatrical expression with some music in it,
Right.
and it's really about doing it in a way that is sustainable.
Right.
So whatever sound you want to make, there's a way to make it sustainable, and it's about understanding the moving parts to do that. And that
Hmm.
has to do simply with breath pressure and an awareness of what's happening at the level of the source, the vocal folds,
Hmm.
and what you can and can't do to like upset your your body.
Right. Right. Of
If
course.
it hurts, if you feel anything in your throat, I say that's wrong because it's not sustainable,
Mm.
not because it doesn't sound good,
Right.
because you can get some pretty wicked sounds and kill yourself,
Yeah.
but there's another way to do it. And if you can maintain the emotional authenticity without associating the physical aggression, that's the name of the game.
Yeah, that's a
So
challenge,
learn
though. I could see where it could be
that's
a
a big
hardship.
challenge.
Yeah, it is. Whew.
That's a big challenge
Huh.
because when they're doing like I like the fry screaming thing is a kind of default
Hmm.
way of doing things and then adding the false chord stuff when necessary, but having this default mode of flow phonation as your, sustainable baseline
Yeah.
MO, and it doesn't feel aggressive enough to these people, to the big stars.
Yeah, I need that. I need to acquire that now. I want it right now.
Yeah, yes, and it doesn't seem to be loud enough or violent sounding enough, and it
Right.
certainly doesn't feel like somebody's dying when you do it. It feels controlled. So it's an acting gig, but
Mm.
it's like you have to put the aggression back into your face, into your body, into your heart. You have to go back to the real deal
Mm.
because it's a real expression. You can't be calculating and
Of
contrived
course, of
with your
course.
screaming. So it's about taking it apart, removing the emotion, and then putting it back in there without it bleeding into the physicality of good technique.
I got you, and it makes perfect sense. It does. Wow. Well, listen,
I
I
think all art's like that, though. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah, you know what? It's all relative. You're right. It really, really is. And sometimes although you know what, the only time I feel that I have to keep my emotion and intensity, which is probably why I'm so uncomfortable sometimes, is in the recording studio and I'm actually recording vocals because I feel
oh
like,
yes,
isn't it like it kind of sucks for me? I'm not gonna lie. There's singers that can live in the recording studio, not me, because I'm more organic. I like to engage with the crowd. I love the natural vibe of what my voice. Just let it go and let it do what it wants to do. And I feel like I'm thinking too much, and that's where I think I hurt
yes.
myself.
That's what happens in the studio
Yeah.
because the air is dry. I mean, not dry in humidity. I mean,
Mm,
the sound, it's like getting soaked up. So
mm,
everything feels like it's in a vacuum. You're in a little box with a
yeah.
bunch of people behind a glass wall looking at you like a bug specimen,
See, you get it.
And so, what I try to tell people to do is you have to take all of that rapture that you have with the people,
Mm,
with the stage, and put it in the side of your ear, whatever ear the can is in. You take
hmm.
one can off and one headphone on, right? And you start having sex with either your left or right ear in terms of like grooving with
Hmm.
the drums.
Yeah.
It's the drums, right?
It,
You got to like get in there and just have sex with the music
right.
and put that kind of all that emotional stuff into your commitment to blending or
Mm.
joining in with the music.
Right, right, right. You know what's hilarious because that's exactly how I sing in the studio. I gotta sing with one can off, and as a drummer, I always rely on the rhythm section to guide me through because as a drummer, I can sing ahead of the beat, or after the beat, or
Mhm.
on top of the beat. I know it's helped me significantly. So there's certainly a
That's
huge amount
so
of
great.
truth. Yeah.
That's a huge thing you
Yep.
just said
Yeah. It's that's a
about
lot of
behind
truth
the
to
beat.
that.
Yeah, I mean, people who sing behind on top of the beat, everything sounds faster.
Yeah.
See people who's like behind the beat a little bit, it's kind of in the pocket.
Yeah. It's so
That's a
true.
very important singing skill.
Yeah, it's hard to do, but yeah, I've done it over the years. It almost came naturally because it's just one of those things where it just makes sense to me, and I don't expect it to make sense to every singer. You have to do it over and over and over. And again, playing drums certainly helped me out a lot.
It's about joining in. When you're joining in with a rhythm that already exists in the universe,
Mm,
it's a everybody it hypnotizes everybody into the same headspace.
right,
Rhythm is the hypnosis.
sure.
So if you aren't paying attention to that and not giving the authority to where that is, that's the key. The drummer is the key.
Mm,
It's the key to the whole thing making one thing. So the way that you phrase stuff, even if you're screaming or singing, it doesn't matter. That's what makes it real,
I get it. I agree. I
you
really
know?
do. I have to say, I admire your passion because I too have always been a risk taker, and
Uh-huh.
people thought I was insane. At 45, quitting my job and still doing what I did, and then I got on The
Mhm.
Voice and got 4 chairs. Singing an iconic rock song and kind of shut up a lot of people. And I bring this stuff up because early on in your career, you literally quit your job, and I'm sure people thought you were insane working with major record labels, entertainment facilities to follow your heart, and even if it meant resorting to that, oh, and I hate to say it, the life of the uncertain next gig. So, my
Yeah.
question to you is, how did you get to that point, and when did you know it was the right time? And what would you recommend to musicians, especially vocalists, listening in, especially during these transitional times in the entertainment industry? That we're faced with that uncertainty.
Well, the music business is changing
Mm.
as we speak. I mean, the whole planet is changing as we
That's an
speak. And
understatement. Yeah.
it's always going to be, in my view, about having the courage to do what you love in every second of your life, even if it's sending a fax or brushing your teeth. The practice of being in love with what you're doing will bring those decisions to fruition in the right way.
I love it. I
So
love it. Yep.
if you do something because you think, based on fear, like I'm not going to quit my job because I won't be able to do this or that. I'm not saying to be impractical,
Hmm.
but to have the courage to not depend on other people to tell you what you love.
Right.
You love what you love, you do it, and that energy will bring exactly what's supposed to happen. You don't really have to plan it out too much. But that love thing is tricky because most of us as singers, we have a giant hole in our heart. And we're the kind of people that
Yeah.
only can, like, um, we only want the love of 1,000 strangers, but forget
Hmm.
about one person. Like one person, that's too scary, but 1,000 people, no problem.
Yeah. We
So
are
we have
emotional
this,
creatures. That's for sure.
we are very, very, like, damaged sometimes. The more damaged, the better.
Right.
The better singer is the better
No great
damaged person.
songs came out of happiness. It's all about
That's
pain and hardship.
that's right. It's all about,
Right.
like, lifting up that, like, pain is okay. Pain is
Mm.
just another color.
Right.
Brown is a color, black is a color,
Right.
gray is a color. Like I sort of open up the so I've had many epiphanies like that. Quitting my day job and going in the subway and singing is like the first epiphany. But even developing the DVD, The Zen of Screaming with the
Hmm.
Buddha and everything else, I knew in my heart that this is what I loved. I was passionate about it. And, I have lost my savings account several times doing, making uh, mistakes, like, not having the experience to put these things together. Always on a project that is like the See the Sound project is something I've been working on for like 10 years, and it's still, I still haven't been able to bring it forward, but
Right.
I will. I will. And
That's
See the
great.
Sound is a cross pollinating of the senses. So you
Mm.
actually use visuals to create vocal um, techniques so
Mhm.
that you don't listen to your voice and try to make a sound, but you're totally in the moment.
Oh wow, that's
Um,
fascinating. Yeah, and
it's like
I noticed you got
drawing
two of
sound.
them. You got two CDs. You got the first volume, and you got the second volume.
Well, the first volume was all about technique. So there was very little screaming on the
Hmm.
first one because it was really basically placement and breathing,
Okay.
super straight up classical. Well, not actually, it's not classical. But it's more about using resonating strategies to make speech vowels sound like talking in a song. That it's more about, like, getting in touch with the instrument, the first one. And the second one was about the different ways of screaming, but the second one, I have so much more research now.
Yeah.
um that was 10 years ago.
Wow.
So now I'm into, like, the neural pathways of how the voice operates in the brain. It's inside of us to communicate, so there's a connection between the intent to communicate something and the sound that it makes, which is very authentic
Mm.
and not choreographed. And that is what I think makes a great singer, is that there's no choreographed, contrived, intentional uh, output results, that it's just straight up off spontaneous, like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
emotion. I didn't choreograph, do. I meant it, and my voice did that. So it's about creating, like, technique that you can incorporate with that kind of authenticity, that you
Wow.
have, like, the resonance and everything else in your back pocket.
I get it.
And See the Sound is, I mean, maybe like the VR revolution is going to help me with that one, but I went to draw vowels in the air.
Well, and that is why you are so successful. These little devices and these systems that you're coming up with. It's brilliant. I wish you the best of luck with that. So, with that being said, we have arrived to the last question of the show, and it is my trademark question, Melissa, which is the obvious one, and that is, what is your mojo? In other words, like what keeps you wanting to bring out these beast vocals from your pupils day in and day out? And of course, you're making a living out of it. And I'm sure you're changing lives. Obviously, I see it. But there's got to be something else that keeps you going. What is it?
It's the love.
Yeah.
It's being of service. Like being an artist for most of my life, until I was 44. I
Mm,
was, in bands till I was 44. That had when I had my son, um, that became being a mom became the primary purpose, and then everything else around that became about love and service.
yeah.
It was not about like I change lives because I give people the ability to do what they love, and that will change their life forever. But one show that I do, I didn't change a life for more than a few minutes.
Hmm.
It was okay. It's not that being a performer is empty because it's wonderful, but that self like living in the mirror and living in I call it dancing in the mirror. Like if you're doing dancing and you're looking at yourself in the mirror, you're
Right.
not dancing.
Hmm.
You're not dancing. So as a performer, if you depend on whether people like you or not, then it's not that fulfilling because there's never enough of that kind of
Yeah.
feedback. I could never be loved enough. It was always empty at the
Hmm.
end of the day.
Wow. Wow.
But now it's like I know that each time I give myself in a lesson and help somebody, it changes their life. It changes the whole energy of everything.
Yeah.
So that's what drives me. Love drives me.
You know,
I'm really serious about that.
I'm glad you confirmed that because that's how essentially I live my life. And, I got that from my dad. And I just lost my dad to COVID on December 1st. And he instilled,
Oh my God.
yeah, he's the one.
Oh my God. I'm so
I
sorry.
know, I know. I talk about him all the time
Ah.
because, he's the reason why I became anything artistically. And he always told me exactly what you said, word for word. If you do something you love and you use that love to empower other people to love, then you've lived life and you'll live a fulfilling life. And I'm glad that you said that because you just completely upheld my life and why I do the things that I do. I love it. I truly love it. Melissa, please tell us how we can all find you, especially our singers out there who want to bring out the inner screamer.
Okay, so to bring out the your unique vocal power, whatever that is,
Right.
whether it's screaming or there is a way to do it that's much better than the DVD. You
Okay.
can get the DVD at melissacross.com,
Okay.
but I have these online classes, which are the bomb because I got expensive with all these like rock stars. The price per hour was sort of put me out of touch with the people that I really wanted to reach.
Right. Right.
And so I have made these classes. It's like 13 hours
Wow.
of voice training for the price of like a lesson, one private lesson.
That's
And
awesome.
it's over 3 weeks, 3 days over 3 weeks, an hour and a half each time. And it goes through systematically how to build your voice for whatever you want to do,
Yeah.
whether it's rapping, screaming, singing, whatever. It's for everybody,
Wow.
even voiceover artists.
And by the way, people, you got to check out her site. It's chock full of goodies, man. I got to stay away. I'm so tempted right now to pick up Zen of Screaming 1 and 2 because you know what? I think I'm a better teacher because I'm such a good student. I like to sponge everything that I can get my way, and the stuff that I'm writing down notes as I do it. Like I'm afraid to get completely sidetracked where I forget where I am, but it's just great. It really, really is, and I appreciate you telling us that. And what about social media? How can people find you? I know you got your Instagram account.
Yeah, my Instagram is called Zen of Screaming. And my Twitter is Melissa Cross, and my Facebook is Melissa Cross.
Love it.
And I haven't done TikTok yet.
I'm surprised.
Don't have anything to wear yet, but you know, these classes are the bomb. They really are.
Right.
I highly much better than the DVD because the DVD was made, believe it or not, in 2005.
Yeah.
I've been studying this and teaching rock stars since then, and I'm so much better now than I was on
Mm.
the DVD. So the DVD is good, and there's a lot of stuff that I still teach that's in the DVD. But to have the opportunity to have me one-on-one working with you on Zoom,
Yeah.
right? That is because I can come to you.
Right.
You ask,
Right.
raise your hand.
Okay. Okay. You sold me. I love it. I love the
Okay.
idea. I love that one-on-one. I'm all about
Come
the
on,
one-on-one.
man. You gotta be you gotta come. You love it. You love
Oh
it.
man. Well, listen, thank you so much, Melissa, seriously, for
Thank you,
joining
man.
us today, and keep
Thank
screaming your way into the hearts and vocal cords
you.
of our current and future rock stars. You are amazing. Thank you so much. And
Thanks, Manny.
let's
What an
keep in
honor.
touch. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Manny. Sorry about your dad.
No,
I lost my mom in September. So
it's a big void. It's a
it's
big
a
void,
big
but
void.
we got to keep this going. We got to keep their legacy.
Keep the love
Yes,
going, man. Keep the
absolutely.
love going. All right. Love ya.
Love you back. Bye.
Bye.
This has been a Mojo for Musicians podcast. If you're a musician, producer, engineer, or any other industry professional wanting to share your mojo and stories of success with our listeners, or just want to share some feedback on today's episode, we'd love to hear from you. So just send us an email at info@mannycabo.com. Thanks for listening.